Welcome to episode 153 of Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and today we continue with the tale of Odysseus and the story of Telemachus, Odysseus, and Eumaeus Reach the City. That evening, when the swineherd returned to his hut, he found Odysseus and Telemachus occupied in preparing a pig for the evening meal. Since Athene had again turned the hero into a ragged beggar, Eumaeus did not recognize him. "Have you come at last?" Telemachus called to him as soon as he had crossed the threshold. "And what news have you brought from Ithaca? Are the suitors still lying in wait for me, or have they given up and left their hiding place?" Eumaeus told him of the ship he had seen returning, and Telemachus smiled knowingly at his father, but so that the swineherd did not notice it. Then the three of them ate and lay down to sleep. The next morning Telemachus prepared to go to the city and said to Eumaeus, "Old man, I must look after my mother now. I want you to take this poor stranger in the city so that he may beg his food from house to house. I cannot possibly assume the burdens of the whole world. I have enough troubles of my own. If the old man is offended at this, so much the worse for him." Odysseus, who was pleasantly surprised at his son's ability to dissemble, answered in the swineherd's stead, "Young man, I myself do not wish to remain here any longer. A beggar is always better off in a town than in the country. Just you go. And when I have warmed myself a little at the fire and the sun is higher in the heaven, your servant here shall guide me to the city." Telemachus hastened on his way. He was still fairly early in the morning when he reached the palace, and the suitors had not yet appeared. He leaned his lance against a pillar at the entrance and crossed the stone threshold of the great hall. Here Euryclea was just spreading the chairs with soft fleeces. When she saw the youth, she ran toward him with tears of joy and welcomed him home. The other servants, too, kissed his head and shoulders, and now Penelope came down from her chamber, slim as Artemis and lovely as Aphrodite. "Have you come back to me, dear son?" she cried, clasping him in her arms and kissing his eyes. "I despaired of seeing you again ever since I knew you had left for Pylos. But tell me, what did you find out about your father?" "Oh, mother," said Telemachus mournfully, though it was very difficult for him to conceal his true feelings, "I have only just escaped death myself. Do not revive my grief for my father the moment I enter this house. Go to the bath, put on festal garments, and pledge hecatombs to the gods when they have granted us revenge. I myself must go to the market to bring a stranger who accompanied me on my voyage, and whom I left with a friend until I should call for him." Penelope did as her son had said, while he took his spear in hand and went toward the marketplace with his dogs at his heels. Athene had shed such grace about him that the citizens marveled at his beauty. The suitors overwhelmed him with flattering words, though in their hearts they brooded on their wicked plan. But Telemachus did not stay with them. He joined three of his father's old friends, Mentor, Antiphus, and Halitherus, and told them as much as he was allowed to. And now Piraeus brought to him Theoclymenus, the soothsayer, and Telemachus greeted both. Piraeus at once begged him to send servants to his house to fetch the presents Menelaus had given Telemachus in parting. But Telemachus said, "The gifts are safer in your house, for I do not know what turn my affairs will take. If the suitors murder me and divide up my possessions, then I should like you to have those beautiful things rather than they. But if I succeed in punishing and destroying them, why then come gaily and bring the treasures to your glad friend." So saying, Telemachus took Theoclymenus by the hand and led him toward the palace. There both had a refreshing bath and ate the morning meal in Penelope's company. Then she sat at her spindle and sadly to her son, "There's really no reason why I should not return to my lonely chamber and wet my couch with tears, as I have done all these years, for it seems you will tell me nothing you have heard about your father." "Dear mother," Telemachus said to her, "I shall gladly tell you all I have heard, and only wish it were news that could be of comfort to you. Old Nestor received me well in Pylos, but he knew nothing at all of my father. So he sent me to Sparta with his son. There I was entertained by Menelaus and Helen, for whose sake the Argives and Trojans suffered so much and so long. Then I learned the scat bit which Proteus, the sea god, had told Menelaus. It was that he had seen Odysseus sorrowing on the island of Ogygia, where Calypso is keeping her in his grotto against his will. He has neither ship nor oarsmen to take him home. When Theoclymenus, the soothsayer, saw that Penelope was deeply moved by these words, he interrupted his young host and said, "He does not know everything, O queen. Listen to my prediction. Odysseus is already in his native land, waiting, or prowling about secretly and plotting the death of your suitors. This I know from the flight of birds, and I told your son the moment I saw the omen." "May your prediction come true," said Penelope with a sigh. "I shall not fail to give you rich rewards." While these three were talking, the suitors were amusing themselves in the court as usual. They threw the discus and hurled the javelin until the herald summoned them to midday meal. Eumaeus and his guest had, in the meantime, set out for the city. Odysseus had slung his beggar's scrip across his shoulder, and the swineherd had put a staff in his hand. Soon they came to the city well where the ancestors of Odysseus had walled in with stone. All about it was a grove of poplars, and the waters gushed forth in a clear stream. Here they met the goatherd MyLinda with two of his helpers, driving the best goats in his herd to the city as food for the wooers. When MyLinda saw Eumaeus and his companion, he began to revile them both. "There you are," he exclaimed. "Birds of a feather flock together. There's one scoundrel leading another. Where are you taking this hungry beggar swineherd? To the city, to go from door to door, lazily begging a crust? If you handed him over to me, he could sweep out the pens and carry young shoots to the kids. Who knows but that he might fatten up a bit on a diet of goat cheese? But he has, of course, learned nothing and can do nothing but beg to fill his belly." So he spoke, and he kicked the beggar in the hip. But Odysseus did not stumble. He did, to be sure, turn over in his mind whether to strike this insolent fellow over the head so hard that he would never rise again. But he curbed his anger and suffered the insult without a word. Eumaeus, however, did not restrain his rage. He scolded the goatherd soundly, and then turned to the well. "Holy nymphs, daughters of Zeus," he said, "if ever my lord has brought you precious offerings, grant my prayer that he may soon return. He would quickly punish this churlish man. He is the worst goatherd in the world, and all he can do is idle away his time in the town." "You dog," Melanthius retorted, "all you are good for is to be sold on the islands as a slave. You might fetch a pretty penny for the rest. I wish Apollo's arrow or the spear of a suitor might strike that Telemachus of yours, so that he joined his father in the underworld." With this parting shot, he went on to the palace and seated himself right opposite Euryclea, for he was well liked among the suitors who permitted him to share their feast. A little later, the swineherd and Odysseus reached the palace. When the hero saw the house from which he had been absent so long a time, his heart beat high. He took his companion by the hand, and he said, "Eumaeus, this must be the house of Odysseus. How splendid it is, and how many rooms it has! How solid is the wall around the court, and what tall, wide gates flank the entrance! It seems a strong fortress as well as a palace, and feasting must be going on inside, for I can catch the scent of roast meat, and I can hear the voice of a singer who is seasoning the banquet with his songs." They took counsel with each other and decided that Eumaeus should go first and reconnoiter in the hall, while Odysseus waited in front of the gate. They were still conferring about this when an old dog lying at the door lifted his head, pricked his ears, and rose. His name was Argos. Odysseus himself had bred him before setting out for Troy. He had been a good hunting dog, but now, in his old age, the men neglected him and let him sleep on a dung heap, swarming with flies. When Argos noticed Odysseus, he seemed to recognize him in spite of his disguise, for he dropped his ears and wagged his tail, but he was too weak to go up to him. Odysseus quickly wiped away a tear, but he hid his sadness and said, "That dog has a bad sort in his prime. You can still see that he is a thoroughbred." "He is indeed," Eumaeus replied. "He was my master's favorite hound. You should have seen him racing through the valley and following the scent of game in the underbrush. But now, since his master is gone, no one pays attention to him. He is utterly neglected, and the servants do not even bother to feed him." And Eumaeus entered the palace. But the dog, who had seen his master again after 20 years, put his head down between his paws and died. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends, enjoy the journey.